What's up, everybody? A Left It Wall update. Left It Wall is now available on Tubi. What does that mean? That means you get to watch it for free. I know there's so many streaming services out there, so many monthly fees, that sometimes renting or buying something just seems like a pain and yet another expense. Well, now it's available free. If you're not already using Tubi, I highly recommend it. You can get it on your smart TV, or you can just watch it online on your computer. Just type in Left It Wall movie, and the Tubi link should come up as one of the available ways to watch it. So if you haven't watched it yet, come on. Now you've got to. Left It Wall on Tubi. Episode 101. Will Wood. Will Wood is a musician, songwriter, and comedian. His show is part storytelling, part comedy, part music, and he can really wail on the piano. Will's been open about his mental health and incorporates it into his art. We take a deep dive into all of it. Please welcome to the show, Will Wood. Will Wood, how are you? Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm hanging in there, doing the best I can. Appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's good to talk to you, and yeah, I think to some extent we're all just sort of hanging in there right now. It's been quite, especially anybody who sees the news on a daily basis. It's just a nonstop.
Right.
And we're going to touch on some of that where it's applicable, so I'm excited.
Okay.
But I want to start at the beginning though. So where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, and it was a really good place, to grow up as a creative person. Very supportive, and my family was super supportive about it too. And so, yeah. How about you? Where are you from?
Where am I from? I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So
cool.
Similar part of the world a little bit. I'm always, my family's big Springsteen nuts and stuff like that. I am too, actually. But yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Right on.
But would you say it was a good place for creatives? Like in what way? Like there was just a lot of art scenes, or like just a family, or a little bit of everything?
It was one of those schools that actually places some amount of value in the arts, and sure, there was too much money being spent on the football field, probably too. But when it comes down to it, I don't know what things are like in the public education system in this day and age. It's been such a long time at this point. I'm out of touch, but I could imagine, looking at the direction that American society has gone in overall, that there's a very good chance that, a lot of the interest in the art forms that I think is important to try and instill youth with is probably overlooked in favor of other things. I don't know for sure, but recently I caught wind of somebody. I can't remember who it was. It was maybe a little brother of someone who grew up in my town, that they were teaching investment courses in the high school that I went to at this point. And I was like, geez, that's, interesting. And I guess that's a useful skill, but good Lord, investment, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like it's important in any form of education that it's not just treated like it's about teaching you how to be a financially successful person, but teaching you to be a well-rounded person with, an intellectually curious mind and so forth. I don't know. I would, and maybe this is just me being a pretentious art dork, but I would rather see philosophy classes in high schools before see investment classes, but I don't know.
No, I hear you, man. I mean, I'm fine with some real world classes to prepare people for what they'll have to deal with in life. That's fine. But I'm with you totally that it should also be about intellectual curiosity. It should be, learning how to learn, and we are, go a big picture with it. I mean, and you live this life. We all do. It's the United States is one of the few countries of its level of wealth that doesn't treat the arts as part of what it means to be human.
Right.
I mean, you look at, even the Nordic countries, even the UK and stuff like that. I mean, they spend, it's about 10 to 1 in art spending, and
Interesting.
even that one is misleading because that one, most of it, almost all of it, goes to the military.
Mm.
So it's like we're just, we just don't have that outlook the way, I mean, I think a lot of people do, like a lot of individuals do, but just as a society, we just don't value it. It's on a
Yeah.
long list of problems.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was fortunate in that, I grew up in an area that actually, placed a great deal of value in self-expression and the performing arts. And, the fact of the matter is that I think, education has to be in many ways, like you said, about learning how to learn and also just stimulating, brain development in such a way that I think it needs to be multifaceted. And so, I was very lucky in that particular regard where my creative interests were uplifted by the community as opposed to ignored.
Were your parents creative too? Like you said, they were encouraging.
They are not like involved in any real creative pursuits. They're not in creative professions. I think that they're creative minded people. And I think that, that might seem like a strange general sort of phrase, but I do think that it's there, and so I do think that at least to a certain extent, of course, I get it from my parents or at least from, extended family members who had an interest in the arts. But, so my grandmother was an opera singer. And so my mother grew up with a great deal of appreciation for music, and she definitely dabbled in music in her life as well. But my parents aren't like, they're not like working artists themselves.
Hmm. So, like getting back to you, what did you migrate to first? Like, was it music, or like what was kind of your first pursuit, and what was the first instrument that was put in your hands?
Well, first instrument was the piano. I started taking lessons when I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, something like that. Like I mentioned, my grandmother sang for the opera at the Met, and she was a pianist herself. And my family inherited her old piano when she passed away, and so my mother was insistent that you know uh, any of her kids, they would all have to learn the piano. And I was the one kid who didn't quit when he was little because piano lessons suck. And the reason ultimately I didn't quit because I was like, oh, I'm the only kid left who hasn't quit, and my mom's going to be so sad if I quit. So I guess I'll keep playing. And it turned into my whole life. So uh, you know, so that was my first instrument, and I guess kind of my first creative pursuit. But it depends on how you look at it, because when does something stop being doodling and start being making art? That's pretty subjective. And I was definitely doodling my whole life before I started selling paintings, and definitely tinkering around on the piano before I started writing songs, and just singing stuff to myself. I had like a little diary where I would write down lyrics to imaginary songs. And what's the difference, really? I mean, they're worse. A child made them, but like when it comes down to it, like it's the same self-expression that's happening. And so, my earliest memories of music are going to be piano lessons, and I can't say I know for sure what my first pursuit really was.
Sure.
What I first became like really like this is what I want to do. Um, Later on in my like when I was in college, I started like focusing on music a bit more. But at the same time, I was still, you know, still doing stand up, still writing in that sort of direction, and just trying out just about anything. And ultimately, what made it so that music became my primary career was that it's the thing that started working for me first. If
Mm,
I started selling tickets to comedy clubs before I started selling tickets to local punk shows, that I might have been doing that more. I don't really know, but um, yeah.
Well, and then what you do now is kind of a fusion of everything. You do comedy in there, and you do stories, and then of course you do music, and you're primarily like you play a lot of rock clubs.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I don't really usually do that. This year was a little bit different from my usual thing. I did like a 10-year anniversary tour. It was the 10-year anniversary of the release of my first album, but like sort of intended just to celebrate the fact that I've been doing this for 10 years in general. And in order to celebrate that whole landmark, I brought my band on the road for the first time since like 2019. And so we did rock clubs for that, but normally I do theaters and smaller rooms, city
Mhm.
wineries, stuff like that. Because it's usually more oriented towards like solo singer songwriter stuff with my weird stuff going on in between. Rock shows are usually, they're kind of a special occasion for me.
So, so you started doing, when did you start doing stand up then, if you were already doing it in college?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I guess probably in college
Okay.
is when I started going to open mics and stuff. And like I stopped, I kind of like, it's not that I ever lost interest, but it stopped being something I had the time or energy to, devote much to for a while. Um, but yeah, no, I started doing open mics and stuff in college, and then, you know, got back into it on and off. I don't know, but I don't really know what I'm getting at. I don't think it's one of those days. Um, I just quit smoking again for the 20th time maybe, and nicotine gum, it doesn't work as well.
It doesn't do
It
much?
just, I mean, it does something. It stops me from losing my mind completely. But right now,
Hmm.
mine's like half lost.
Oh, okay. Have you ever tried the patch thing? Did you ever do the patches?
No, I've never tried the patches.
Okay.
Why, you used to be a smoker?
No, no, I've never smoked. I have no insight to
Good.
offer here. I just know it exists.
Right. Yeah. No, I've mostly just tried quitting cold turkey and occasionally trying with nicotine gum, and usually I'm able to stay off the stupid garbage for like 6 to 8 months before I end up inevitably falling off the wagon again.
Mm.
And I think that's better than constantly smoking. But like, anyway, point is, words are a little scrambled in my brain today,
No
so I
worries, man. I
apologize.
mean, yeah, I can imagine, yeah, never been a smoker myself, but I can imagine it's pretty. I mean, if I had to quit coffee, I don't know how that would pan out. And so, I mean, they're all addictions, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine. But well, where was college?
College was a few different places.
Oh, okay.
I was kind of a serial dropout. I kind of just like bounced from college to college for a few years and never got a degree, but did end up essentially getting a college education, not on paper, but like, you know, I took a lot of different college classes, probably more than most people with a bachelor's degree, but like, it was just like, um, it was chaos. So
Okay.
it was a bunch of different places.
Why so?
Um, I was a pretty wild kid.
Okay.
I was a little loose cannon, a little bit out there.
All right.
And so nothing ever just seemed to work for me.
Okay. Just too much partying, or what was like loose cannon in what way?
I guess you could call it too much partying. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Fair enough.
Something like it. Yeah.
So you bounced around from some colleges, you were doing some stand up, and then so what happens next? Like when does the band life start getting involved? Like what's the anatomy post college?
So I started playing so I put out my first record in 2015. And I put it out under the name Willwood and the Tapeworms because I wanted to make it so that, you know, it was a solo project, but also I could tell the local underground scene that, hey, I'll still bring my band around and we'll really, put on a high energy show. So I wanted to kind of like have the best of both worlds because at the time I was doing like stand-up open mics and music open mics and, just wanted to have a recording. So I wanted to kind of have a little bit of both. And when I put it out, I started playing with a band that would become, Willwood and the Tapeworms. And it it started gaining a little bit of traction on like the underground scene fairly quickly.
Now, where was this?
This was all mostly in New Jersey.
Okay.
There are a lot of different small venues in New Jersey, a lot of bars and just small clubs and like spaces that, I don't even know how to describe a lot of the rooms that sort of DIY bands play. But, occasionally there'd be, what do they call it? A Knights of Columbus or, something like that, VFD,
Yep.
or VFW. And so, you know, so that would, so that was kind of all over the state. And then there were also like sometimes basement shows that would happen. And we would occasionally, float around the tri-state area, just kind of taking any opportunity that we could, either as a band or just as a solo performance. And
So
that's
many really influential music scenes were just fostered that way, particularly
yeah.
in Jersey. I mean, especially it's like you look at, like the whole like pop punk wave that really blew up in like the early 2000s. A lot of that started in Jersey basements. You look at like the third wave ska scene, and that wasn't exclusively in Jersey, obviously, but there was a lot of like Jersey influence. And then when I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so it's like we got a lot of that stuff, as it was starting to bubble. Like it would start to bubble in Jersey, and then they would start doing like the tri-state area. Then they'd get all the way out to Pittsburgh after they like had built something in Philly first. So we would kind of get, I grew up with all that shit, like all that stuff was like real important to me. So, I mean, yeah, like so much of those music seeds, Jersey was just a heavy hitter and all that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff coming out of the Pittsburgh area as well. So yeah, New Jersey, there's something about it that just like stimulates, creative self-expression. Maybe it's the density of the population. Maybe it's the chemicals that they're pumping into the air. Who knows? But you know, yeah. So that started to pick up a little bit. People started coming out to shows, and eventually got to the point where it was like, it was like 2016. So not too long after I started, that it became like, I don't have time to be both a student and to be pursuing this as seriously as it seems like I'm going to be able to pursue it. And so that's when I dropped out of college for the last time, and, just dedicated myself to doing it all as much myself as I could, and just taking whatever opportunity I could and just trying to find some way to make a living doing it. I spent, starting around 2016, it just became my full-time job. Even though it didn't really start paying the bills until years after that.
Mm-hmm. So how were those early years? Like just kind of like doing the DIY thing and just kind of like making it happen, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty slapdash. It was kind of like, what can I do to get whatever kind of attention I could possibly get? And so I would, submit myself to opportunities to be interviewed by local publications or local public access TV shows, and then just, just try and make a scene wherever I could, do some like sophomoric proto, like pseudo Andy Kaufman shit. And, just try and be loud and try and make noise and try and see if I can get people talking, positively or negatively, didn't matter. And so that would include a lot of like, stupid costumes and grandiose stage antics and just making up random stuff about my life just to get people to not know what's going on and want to talk about it, get people interested in whatever way I could. And so there were a lot of big swings, a lot of violent onstage antics, a lot of, kind of character work. Like I would show up to a show in character as this, I don't even know how to describe the character that I would show up as, except for like the idea was to try and play a character who did not have set personality traits, with the exception of just being over the top. But show up as this over the top character and not drop character until after I had left the venue. I was pretty committed to that, and I wanted to make every facet of my life an extension of the art, as much an extension of the art as I possibly could, and get any kind of attention I could as a result of it. And it was chaotic. It was weird. I tried a lot of stuff that I think a lot of independent underground or DIY musicians probably don't do or wouldn't want to do, or just wouldn't like kind of just know better than to try doing. Um, but and it was very much like fully like opportunistic. There's like a big culture to like the DIY music scene that's all about like supporting the scene and supporting one another. And I was like, no, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make money, not friends. And it was like, and so I was kind of like a little, I think, a bit of like a local scene cryptid to a certain extent.
Mm.
And and that got me to a place where I was able to make like a meager living after a few years of doing it. And so so yeah, and it really was just like doing whatever. There were very few rules or limits or whatever. So
Well, did that, like all the character work and all the antics, did that kind of inform, like what you're doing now, and did that kind of lead to what you're doing now?
I think so, but not in like a direct sort of way. I think that to a certain extent, a lot of that is still kind of at this point in my career, I'm still trying to live it down, is what it is. You know what I mean? Like that, the way that I approached my career when I was still like, really hungry and really just desperate for anything I could do to make it so that I could pay rent. Because for me, it was like nothing that I tried just to like work an ordinary job. I couldn't hold down a job. I was too fucking crazy. And so this was the one thing that seemed to be like something I was good at that might work out for me. And so I was really desperate, and I was really willing to do just about anything. And so at this point, I look back at the early years and I'm just like, yeah, that was a lot of noise. That was embarrassing, and like a lot of media from that time period still persists and is still enjoyed by people who came to become fans of me years later, despite it no longer serving the purpose it was supposed to serve. And so at this point, it's kind of just like, if anything, the way that it's influenced me as an artist the most is that it's given me the thing to try, and it's given me something to almost, it's been a challenge to try and push back against it as like a means of trying to establish myself as an artist that's, more, who's not wrapping everything up in character work. If anything, it's more of an obstacle at this point. And I think a lot of the directions that I've gone creatively since then were probably more influenced by the presence of that obstacle than influenced by the roots that I actually came from in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, so let's getting up to present. I got to watch a good portion of your upcoming special, which thanks for that. I really enjoyed it. And I wonder if you could elaborate some. You talked about how you went viral, and it was one of the worst things that ever happened to you.
Yeah,
And I was wondering if you could expand on that in any way you want.
sure. It was it was so not what I ever thought would happen. Um, I didn't expect it. I didn't try to make it happen. A lot of people they're looking for the golden goose of going viral. And so a lot of people, they try to game the algorithm, and they go on these short form content websites and they push and they push. And I never had a TikTok, and I don't do short form content. And it's almost like I had one song that basically it went viral despite my best efforts to never go viral. Because in the early years, I was desperate for any attention that I could get. But once I got into a point where I didn't need it in order to survive, I like cooled off quite a bit. And I was just like, all right, let's just, focus on, being creative and expressing myself in a way that feels authentic to me. And so I wasn't so desperate anymore. I wasn't so hungry anymore. I was just trying to like live a halfway comfortable life doing something that I love and that I'm good at. And then one day it was just all of a sudden everybody's telling me I got this one song that's blowing up on TikTok. And I'm just like, no, not TikTok, anywhere but TikTok. And, you know, and I was terrified, because I am as a person so nothing like TikTok as, you know what I mean? Like I don't gel with any of it, that whole scene. Like it's not me. And it attracted a portion of fans who I think really don't, who I don't really have much in common with. And it attracted a small but vocal minority of people who, how do I put this? There comes a point where it's like, just by rule of large numbers, if you have 1 million people walking down the street, the odds that like there's a serial killer in there, pretty high. You get 1 million people walking down the street, one of them probably a serial killer,
Yeah.
just because there's that many people. And so when all of a sudden 1 million people are talking about you or have opinions about you or are making content about their idea of you, you're going to get a lot of weird stuff. And that weird stuff is going to include, weird sexually aggressive stuff. It's going to include just, stuff that like really pushes any normal human being's boundaries, just like there's like people who have Google Drive folders full of pictures of my mom that they pass around like it's collectibles. Like TikTok happened and my life stopped being at all even close to something that could be normal.
Mm.
And so in the sense, like it was, I say in the film that it's not really that it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It's just that it was the most thing that ever happened to me, because now I'm able to make a good living doing something I love. And, in that rule of large numbers, yes, there's going to be a couple serial killers, but there's also going to be a couple people out there for whom I have like a truly very genuine commonality. When you reach that many people, you have the opportunity to reach people with whom, you really resonate and who really get what you're saying. And that is something that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do. So it was the most thing that ever happened to me, not really the worst. But when first confronting that experience, the only thing that I could think about was, all of a sudden very negative side effects to it. There's like, yes, it was great to finally be able to make a little bit more money and to like actually live a relatively comfortable lifestyle and not be living so paycheck to paycheck or whatever. But money can't buy everything. And, there's some things where it's just like, hey, I would rather be broke than have all these kids sending me death threats in the mail and shit,
Mm.
So it's like, you know, um, so no, it wasn't the worst thing, but it was the most thing. And that when something is big, when something that big happens to you, it's going to have great stuff and it's going to have awful stuff. And so in the film, that's kind of to a certain extent what I'm kind of talking about through a lot of it is, kind of learning to accept that change in my life and the way my life works now, if that makes any sense.
No, it totally does, and I think any creative, even if they haven't gone viral, like can really relate to that. And I think, let me run this by you. I think part of the beauty, especially of live performance, be it stand up, music, whatever, is a lot of times, when you look at an online audience where you do get, you get the beauty and then you get the serial killers. A lot of times those serial killers aren't the people buying tickets, though.
Yeah.
It's the beauty.
Yeah, the real world, if you were to look like in like online Willwood fan spaces, it's very different from the culture that exists at shows.
Mhm.
Um, if you look at like, uh, like I try to avoid ever looking at this stuff, but I've seen it. I'm only human. You
Right.
can't never Google yourself. It's gonna happen at some point. And if you look in some of like the online fandom spaces, if fandom has a very specific culture, and it can get very weird, and it can foster a lot of strange behavior, and some of that can then go off into like a pretty problematic direction. Um, but like the real world, yeah, no, you're right. They're not often buying the tickets quite so much. Sometimes they are, of course, but
Sure.
every fan who I've met like in person, at least almost every one of them, has been someone like who, yeah, maybe I don't necessarily relate to them. Maybe we come from very different worlds. But they've all been perfectly, kind, respectful people who, genuinely, just are looking to connect. And yeah, the serial killers aren't buying the tickets, not usually anyway. And on the rare occasion that they do, you kind of just have to take the good with the bad.
Sure. Yeah. So, you talk about how you try to avoid social media. Was that post going viral, pre going viral, or the whole time?
It was more post going viral, yeah.
Okay.
I was as active as anybody else on social media until TikTok came around. Um, I used to have a lot of fun with social media when I was younger, and I was doing my, whole let's be as crazy as possible thing. I would post some really provocative stuff on social media. And, I would try and get attention. Not because I thought that I would go viral, because viral didn't mean then what it means now, but, it was a different landscape. 2016, posting bizarre Instagram stories, it's not the same as posting Instagram reels today. And, virality was not a thing that people were really pursuing in the same way they are now. But when as soon the first time I tried downloading TikTok, within like 10 minutes of being on it, I was like, oh, this is evil and will destroy my psyche forever if I don't delete it forever. And so I did. And um uh and so after that point, yeah, really it was the start of the pandemic where I was like, I don't know if, yeah, I think social media is something I have to at least very heavily temper my relationship with.
Hmm.
And there have been periods of time where I've completely eschewed it, and then periods of time where I've been a little bit more active on it. But since TikTok, it's been try to stay a little bit hands off anyway, for the most part.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I am on TikTok, but I have no idea what I'm doing on it, and I've never
Right.
used it as a user. It is just a bulletin board to me, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's to the point where sometimes I'll get comments where people are like, is this Ron's actual TikTok account?
Right.
I think this is just some random person posting applicable video of his, but it is
Yeah.
in fact me. I just don't know what I'm doing on TikTok and don't want to learn. But
Right.
then I've experienced very little success on TikTok, except for one time I had a thing go crazy viral, and it ended up getting picked up by the Discovery Channel.
Wow.
And yeah, like it was so random. So it's like you could still to this day, like you'll see my videos, and I mean some of them did okay. They got like like maybe 10,000 views or something like that. Some of them are like almost nothing. And then there's this random one that I think crossed 1 million, and the Discovery Channel like did a segment on it and stuff like. And I
Wow.
don't know how the hell that happened. Like I still don't know. I mean, so yeah, it is a weird platform.
Yeah.
I feel like in many ways things have gotten progressively. I don't want to say worse, but I feel like that's the only way I can put it, because I feel like it started out really cool with MySpace, and then things just got worse and worse. We
Yeah.
didn't know what we had.
No, we didn't. We could never foresee the enshittification and the attempts to make every single website into TikTok and Facebook at the same time. Um, for sure. I definitely like, but at the same time, I also can't help but think like, how on earth could I have made the career that I've been lucky enough to be able to make uh, if it was still just MySpace? It's something like I have to like keep in mind. It's like I have to be honest about how I feel about social media and find some way to reconcile that with the fact that it's social media's existence that has allowed me to grow the way I've been able to grow. You
Hmm.
know, before, the time of the content recommendation algorithms, I was on my way, but it was pretty slow, like,
Yeah.
so, you got to be grateful for what you can, what you have, and, try and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I guess it's tough to know because it's like, I mean, for all you know, maybe things would have happened even faster if it was only MySpace. Like maybe because it's like MySpace was really made for music at first,
Right.
at least. And
Yeah.
so, like, who knows? Like, it's impossible to know because like the internet just evolved a certain way and
Right.
communities changed. But yeah, I don't know. It's a wild thing to think about. Well, I want to talk about your mental illness that you know bring into your act and that you kind of talk openly about. Could you, first of all, kind of like expand on that? I don't want to like speak for you there, but kind of unpack that.
Um, it's tough to talk about, not because it's like it's so uncomfortable or something. Like I don't mind talking about it. It's just I have a lot of complicated feelings about the whole thing. You know, I've tried to make an effort to always say that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, uh, and avoid ever saying that I have bipolar disorder. And it sounds like a an insignificant semantic distinction, but it is one that I personally find important because when it comes down to it, when you have a mental illness, there's no pathogen, there's no brain scan anybody ran to find some cellular or structural abnormality. You haven't, when you've diagnosed someone with a mental illness, you haven't found a cause, haven't found an agent of that dysfunction. What you've done is you've found uh, a cluster of symptoms or simply put traits in one's behavior or experiential patterns that you can tie to that you can associate and put under a linguistic umbrella. The DSM-5 is a list of labels, more so than it really is a list of diseases. And that isn't to say that the experiences of somebody who meets diagnostic criteria for a mental illness doesn't have a life that should be regarded as a medical concern,
Hmm.
uh, or has a life that shouldn't be treated with some amount of medical approach. Like I take my medication every day, and I donate a great deal of my income to the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. I do believe in psychiatry, and I do believe in mental health as a concept. I'm not like pure anti-psychiatry, but I'd be being intellectually disingenuous if I didn't, also express my thoughts on, the fact that the whole subject is mired in subjectivity, and a lot of it ultimately comes down to social construct. Yeah, if you have, if you meet diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia, it's because your experiential and behavioral patterns are such that make it so that you cannot survive without intervention. And that's the case with a great deal of diagnoses. And so, it almost feels like it's easy to interpret what I'm saying as being like, well, we all have a little schizophrenia, and of course that's not true. But, it's, but at the same time, I feel like, I do not necessarily believe that I relate to the experience of the ordinary person who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I just don't know. I don't feel like I could ever honestly purport myself to be some example of bipolarity. Some, like, yeah, this is what bipolar is. This is what it looks like, and that's my life. That wouldn't be true. Which is why I tend to avoid saying I'm bipolar. and tend to just say I'm that at least was my diagnosis. But diagnostic labels can shift over the course of a patient's psychiatric career. And I'm at a point in my life where it doesn't help me to think about my life in terms of how do I cope with my bipolar disorder. It's more just how do I cope with the way that I'm wired and the difficulties that those wirings present me, and how do I and how do I recover from the miswirings. Uh, you know, Instead of looking at it as being like I have a disease, it's more just I have problems, and those problems have been severe enough where they have become at times in my life a concern worth calling medical. Um, but I think I'm kind of rambling at this point, I think. But the point is that, you know, um, I believe in the destigmatization of mental illness, but I also believe in the honest conversation about it, because as of right now, it seems like our society has like two ways of looking at mental illness as a whole. People seem to either want to say, I am inherently broken. I have a disease. I will never be better. And the only thing that could ever save me is thank God for AstraZeneca for delivering me from this. Or there's depression isn't real. Go for a jog, you lazy millennial. And I don't believe that either of these perspectives are healthy or progressive or make a difference, because I think that the truth lies in neither of those perspectives. And so I don't know. I believe in the nuanced destigmatization of mental illness, and I don't know. Not to pat myself on the back for look at me, I'm so nuanced, but I don't know. I'm babbling at this point.
No, no, no.
But
I mean, dude, I think you are approaching the discipline with a very, with a very balanced approach that is also accurate and based on, your experience. And I think that the societal ill you're describing is one that we just see in pretty much every element of life these days. People
yeah,
either want 100% or 0%, and that's not the way the world works, and that's certainly not the way a human body and a human brain works.
yeah,
So it's like, how can you expect? And I mean, I'll I'll share a little bit of firsthand experience I've had in this world. So when I was in grad school, I'm pretty sure our department was infiltrated by a visiting person who I don't have the proof of this, but I'm fairly certain the person was a Scientologist. And they basically made the claim that, like they kind of took that, that first part of what you were saying, they took that to the finish line saying, oh yeah, it's not real. And the if you've ever taken a medication, you've just been drugged and that's it. There is no, which is just, I think, very anti-intellectual, very, like a very, very shallow read on things. And I was looking around, and there were a handful of other people in the department that were going, what the fuck? But then there were some other people that were like, oh, this is interesting. And it was a little frightening, Will, not gonna lie.
yeah. That sounds disturbing.
It was very disturbing. It was very, very disturbing.
When you were in grad school?
Grad school, dude. This was
Yeah.
grad school. Yeah. So I mean,
What
it
were
should
you
have never happened.
what were you studying at the time?
Communication. I have a my master's is in rhetoric and philosophy, but
Interesting.
it's a communication degree.
Right.
But yeah, and let me tell you, a ticket to making money. Yeah, let me most useful masters you can get. But
Yeah. Rhetoric and philosophy.
oh man, just I just cashed a check here and you say it, man. It's just
Nice.
but
It's such a
yeah.
shame. We live in a fucking backwards ass world. Because if you ask me, rhetoric and philosophy, that sounds like the kind of field of study that we need more of now than ever. Uh, but I guess people just want. I don't know. I don't know who's
Well,
hiring now. But
you know what? It's about as human as you can get. So AI is not going to be able to do anything to it other than just scrape existing thoughts.
right.
So maybe, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, So, well, you've already touched on this, and I kind of wanted to go here next anyway. Like, what is kind of your assessment on where things are going culturally now? I mean, as somebody who, donates the type of money you do to the causes you do, and I mean, I would make the argument, we're talking about these extremes. I would say we're in an extreme right now, and the extreme is, very, very dangerous, and public health is being replaced by eugenics. It's being replaced by, very, very uh, anti uh, site, anti mental health sentiments. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think that right now we are on the precipice of a descent into a period of history that may take a great deal of time to pass.
Mm.
I I hesitate to say we're going through a rough period because that's, at the start of the Dark Ages, I'm sure everybody thought, yeah, things are kind of tough right now, but they'll turn around. And then 300 years later, everybody's still, shoveling shit with their hands and dying of the plague. And so the fact of the matter is that historical changes sometimes last many generations before things get at all better for the ordinary person. And so there is part of me that does genuinely believe, and I say this in Slouching Towards Branson, I say sometimes I can't help but believe that if we're lucky, we'll live to see more dark ages. And that's the scary thing right now. And I think that the only real hope, and this might be reductive, but I can't help but feel this way, and that is that the only real hope we have of avoiding a slide into 100 years of post-truth, post-reality, dream world, hyper-reality hellscape is if we pass some laws that hold big data companies accountable for their manipulative content recommendation algorithms. I believe that our misinformation problem, our anti-intellectual, willful ignorance problem, our, lack of, dialectical thinking, our incapacity to see in shades of gray, all of that stuff is being consciously stoked by hordes of scientists that work for Meta, doing everything they can to figure out how to fuck with the user's head in such a way that benefits engagement above all else. And so, because that is the primary driver of cultural discourse right now, I think that we're kind of fucking doomed unless something is done to make sure that these companies that control not just our media, but our relationship to it and our relationships to one another, if we don't make sure those companies are prevented from exploiting what Bo Burnham, I think, refers to as the neurochemical drama of being a human being, we're doomed. If they can't be stopped, we're fucked. And I think that that's really it. And so that is the sliver of hope we have, is that sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, my very strong belief that everything that is happening in our culture right now is the conscious effort of extremely powerful bad actors. Hopefully that belief catches on a little bit. I'm here just saying, wake up, sheeple. We're at the dawn of a new dark ages, but we can turn this thing around as long as we are able to stop the the brainwashing. It's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Well, and so many people don't realize that the algorithm is the problem. Like so many people don't realize that's the root of all this. So they come up with, and I do like I've been involved in digital rights policy campaigns and things like that. So you see a lot of just BS astroturfing, where in reality they're like, oh yeah, we're going to solve this problem. But what we're really doing is we're just going to make things a little bit harder for LGBTQ youth to find resources online. That's what we're really trying to do. But we're telling you we're going to solve this other problem that could totally be solved by better data privacy, so that these algorithms aren't able to work the way they want to work. But guess who doesn't want to see that happen? Well, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world.
Yeah.
And then, and the problem is that who's really controlling the levers there are some of the most evil people on the frickin' planet. And at the end of the day, they are all friends.
Yeah. Yep. All friends hanging out on fucking Little St. James together. Yeah. Nightmare.
It is wild. Well, do you think there's a chance that this Dark Ages could be closer than further away to the Renaissance?
Maybe. I think when it, in tandem with AI media generation getting better and better and better, my fear is that the most likely case scenario is that our, doom scrolling addictions are only going to be, kicked into hyperdrive in terms of the impact it has on our capacity to think rationally and our capacity to connect with other people, because it's bad enough to be, bed rotting and doom scrolling through your Instagram feed and having everything that's fed to you be fed to you for personal reasons based on an extensive psychological profile done on you. It's worse. It's bad enough that it's that. It's going to be even worse when it doesn't even have to be organically uploaded stuff. It can just be you swiped and immediately Instagram fed you precisely the kind of content that your psyche requires in order to exercise the kind of control it wants over you in that moment through, immediately on the spot AI generated content that pokes you right where you're weakest. And, so that's my fear, is that we're pretty set up for it to get 10 times worse. But, it could go the other way. It could be that people, push back hard enough. It's just going to depend on like whether or not people feel like we really can. Because to a certain extent, our economic state and our environment make it so that it's very hard to be at all motivated, let alone have the energy to make much difference in the world. I think it's scary to try, and it's risky to try, and everybody's got bills to pay. And I would much sooner fuck off to Canada than take to the streets myself. So, I don't know. It's a weird state we're in. I would love to end this on a totally positive note. But I have a limited amount of positive thoughts to give. I guess I would just say that there is the chance that as a society, we're all able to wake up in such a way that allows reasonable legislation to be passed that forces these big data companies and these social media companies to, if not stop spying on people, stop being allowed to make their systems designed in such a way that I think is intentionally fucking with people's heads.
Well, I mean, to try to spin everything we're talking about into a positive, the one. So I recently did the Hollywood Fringe Festival with a play that I wrote, and there were some people speculating. It's like there is this resurgence of interest in theater and things like that, and I think that the ricochet of AI generated content and all those things is that people are really thirsty for authenticity, and it's human nature to still crave that. There's no algorithm can like break that, because that's again bringing it back to the human frickin' brain. That's what that is. We're still wired that way. And so I think that another sort of inkling of hope was, I think part of the reason we're in the mess we're in is that people just don't have the money to go out and enjoy life right now. People are just freaking broke. And if they weren't, I think a lot of people would be putting those phones down at least often enough to have a healthier relationship with all of it. And they'd be going to more Will Wood shows and things like that.
Well, I certainly agree that that's a hope that I've had. I'm glad to hear that you had an experience like that, because, that is what I've been hoping, is that maybe with the darkness of our, technological media landscape, it will force people to want to go back outside again and want to have human interactions and enjoy live performance. And I have felt that live performance is more valuable now than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
But, I haven't necessarily had, the experience where I felt like that resurgence is definitely happening as opposed to just happening in my hopes and dreams. And so like, it's good to hear that like, live theater is like, I do tend to think that live theater is like the last bastion of art, where it's like that is something that AI cannot do, and if it could do, people wouldn't want to see it. It's just, and so that's definitely like comforting to know that like there are people who are coming around and who do want to see live theater. People going to see the Slouching Towards Branson performances, a lot of them, they didn't know what was happening. They had no idea what was going to happen when they came to the show. So I kind of tricked them into seeing live theater. So, it's good to know that people do it willingly too.
Well, so in closing, let people know where they can go to learn more about you, plug anything you got coming up.
So my website's willwood.net. This Friday, August 15th at around 5 p.m., I think, Eastern time, the Slouching Towards Branson film will be available on my Patreon, patreon.com/therealwillwood. That film will be accessible to the general public for $5 or free to anybody who's already a paid member of the Patreon. So that'll be on Friday, Slouching Towards Branson. It's not really a concert film, not really a stand-up special, kind of neither, a little bit of both. Here's that's that.
Will, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It was a real pleasure.
That was Will Wood. Check out all of his stuff. Check out the new special. I got to watch it before it was released. It is very, very good. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. And be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Please make sure you're subscribed, especially if you get this show on YouTube. That really helps a show like this grow, which this is still a very new podcast in the big scheme of things. And if you want to support the show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/Ron Placone. For Get What You Can, Love It, you get all kinds of exclusive content. We do a Zoom hangout once a month. It's a really cool hang with creative, like-minded people. You get upcoming information on films and events that are not yet available to the public. You get full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. It's a really cool community, and that's all for a Get What You Can level. All right, 101. We are 101 like the Dalmatians. Isn't that, that movie, I am of the era of that class of Disney animated movies. 101 Dalmatians was among all, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Lion King, all those. And I don't remember how 101 Dalmatians end. I know that the animals were safe. Dogs were safe. Not trying to spoil anything, but I forget all the details. It's just I know that the bad guy, Cruella de Vil, she already had a nice fur coat. I noticed that at the beginning. Like, she already has a fur coat, but she needed more. And she needed 101 dogs to fulfill that need, which is pretty wow. In the movies, you're taught that Cruella de Vil is the bad guy, but then in the real world, they teach you to aspire to be that. It's an interesting paradox, isn't it? All right, we'll catch you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.